Hey fam, and we are back. This will probably be my last installment, if you will, for this morning because I do have to get up and get ready for work soon. But I was getting ready to jump up to 2020, and I realized the significance of the timelines for me is because, to be honest, my awakening, if you will, has not been just a one day. I mean, I've heard people talk about that, and all of a sudden they had this profound awakening, and it was like a one and done. It wasn't like that for me. My awakening for real has taken 25 years to this point. The Matrix was a profound movie for me. I watched everything. I mean, the whole series. If you haven't ever watched the Matrix series, I strongly, highly, that is like required reading, as they say, or required viewing. But it shifted something in me so profoundly. I remember the first time I saw it was actually on VHS tape. Some folks that are listening to this probably have never actually seen or used a VHS tape player, but it shifted my mind so hard that when the movie was over, as the credits were rolling at the end, I had to literally rewind it and watch it immediately the second time. And even then, I didn't quite understand what everything meant. Of course, it took me years down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole and several of those things. I couldn't stay there too long, but the reason I mentioned that was because in 2007 I didn't know it at the time, but I began to have clairaudient experiences just here and there. In 2007, I received the name of my inner being, my higher self, Ananya Ngozi. In 2007, the first time, like I said, I didn't recognize it for what it was, but 2007 was the first time that I had a clairaudient experience so loud that I knew for the first time that I did not think those thoughts. I was in a Seventh day Adventist prayer meeting, like a special meeting with a guy that I was dating at the time. Um, and I had kind of zoned out because I was really still angry with religion at that time. I was just basically going because that was his thing. I respected religion, but excuse me, I wasn't like devoutly practicing anything. But as this person was speaking, I kind of zoned out and I heard, "You'll need to learn another language and you're going to be moving to Africa." Now, I had no idea what that meant at the time. I thought I was going to be going over there making orphanages or something. I didn't know because I had a friend of mine, that was where her focus was. But I was cool. I didn't understand it. And in 2008, I had another clairaudient experience. By then, I had left Florida, moved to Virginia, and that night, it was like 1:30 in the morning. I got up to go to the bathroom, and I heard a message in three parts, or four parts actually. And I won't get into everything because two of the messages were for someone else. One was for a coworker, one was for the guy I was dating by that time, and both of those people is such a stark example now in hindsight that I see it. But the woman who listened to what I said, the message actually saved her life. The person who didn't listen to what I said, his not listening to what I said cost him over $200 million. And I was kind of floored at that point. Still not trusting my clairaudience, mainly because the person that didn't listen to me, I realize now over time, we've been friends, supposed friends. We dated for a while. He dumped me, came back into my life in the friend zone, and I didn't even understand what that was all about until more recently. But constantly kind of lording it over me spiritually. Well, I was waiting for you to catch up, and one of these days you'll understand. And he's so clairaudient, and he can hear, and his messages and guidances and all of that. But every single thing, just about, he claimed that he took some of my advice. But after I really looked at it over the years, most of the things that I'd ever told him, he did the exact opposite. He sat there and explained to me why he was so more spiritually advanced and understood the da 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 and his guides and his this and he's a prayer warrior and blah blah blah. But he did exactly the opposite of the things that I was saying, and as a result, has kept himself in the middle of messy, nasty, karmic-y, not feeling good, not financially advantageous situations the whole time, and using me to trauma dump to make himself feel better about the karmic mess that he keeps himself involved in. Fine, no problem. But it was impacting my life as well. That's the only reason I mentioned all of that. It created a doubt in me for the spiritual gifts that were unfolding. Now, in 2011, I had a couple of experiences, and like I said, about 2013 or so, I had somebody that kind of breezed through my life and dropped some prophecy. I've had two or three people that I ain't never known, they only saw once in life, walk up to me, say some really profound stuff, and then gone. I should have took that as a clue as well, but again, you got to get to where you start putting all this stuff together, and I had so much drama going on around me that I didn't see it at first. But again, I'm mentioning these specific occurrences and dates because even before 2020, in 2017, when I started seeing the number synchronicities, that was profound for me as well. I mean, it got to the point where I was kind of sick of seeing the numbers. I'm like, all right, already with the numbers. But one day in 2017, I'm sitting outside work, enjoying the sun, enjoying the whatever, and I had a very loud thought come through, and it was so random, but it was that very often what people in society label as insanity is actually people that are having moments of profound clarity, but they can't find the adequate words to express it. So those that don't understand, when they try to speak too soon, they're perceived as crazy. And shortly after I had that thought, in rapid succession, I had two examples literally walk up to me on the street and prove it. One gentleman came to me and he struck up, and again, I'm sitting on the same bench, so it wasn't like a lot of time had to go by. I had the thought, and this guy came up and asked for directions or something, struck up a conversation, and we stood there, we sat and talked for a few minutes, and I could tell that he had really, really had a connection, but he couldn't find the words. And he understood that people thought that he was crazy, but he's really not. But he sounded kind of crazy the way he was coming across because he was so enthusiastic. Think Kanye West when he had that revelation in that crowded group of people and everybody started talking about he's crazy. He ain't crazy. He just woke up and he decided to speak too soon on what he understood because he couldn't find the words. But by the same turn, I then had another lady come up to me, and I was able to see the difference in sharp contrast because she started talking too, and I could tell no, she genuinely has some psychiatric issues, psychological issues, whatever, some stuff that could be diagnosed in the DSM, put it that way. Um, so I could see the difference in the two. I didn't understand that I was being shown that because I'm being kind of herded to a place where I'm going to have to say some things that make me sound a little crazy. But that's fine. So now I took that aside to take us back to 2020 because for me, that's when it really started kind of getting down to the nitty gritty, if you will. Um, it was an amazing time. Like I said, I am a different sort. I had been enough on the conspiracy theory path that when the pandemic broke out, rather than panic, I definitely wasn't finna run out and get the jab because you can't just roll out stuff like that to me. There's enough problems with medications and testing even after years of trials. They always still have that quiet part at the end about all the side effects, the da 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 da, and I pay attention to that. I listen to the side effects harder than I listen to the indications. I was that kid that literally, growing up, my mother was a nurse, so I used to read the American Journal of Nursing and RN magazine, and every year she would get a physician's desk reference, and I would literally sit there and look at medications and read the contraindications and what it's used for, and then go back and track down those medicines that are contraindicated, what they're for, and their contraindications. I was that nerd. So I really wasn't trying to hear nothing about this. And the main reason I didn't want the jab was because I started looking at the information from the CDC and worldometers.net, whatever it was keeping all the statistics for the pandemic. And the one thing I noticed was that at no point ever during any of that did the mortality rate ever pass 1.5%. And I'm like, what? So you're gonna shut the world down for something that has a 1.5% mortality or morbidity rate? That's not a real pandemic. There's a political agenda happening here. And I just continued to watch it and watch the stats and watch the rates of infection plus the death tolls and the this and the that. And I'm like, nah, this isn't something that I want to partake in. And I just kind of kept it on the sideline, but just focused on what I was doing. I was cleansing, going outside barefoot, meditating, doing my sun gazing, and as a result of that, trying to just, like I said, couldn't go nowhere. I'm spending hours outside, grounding, connecting spiritually. My clairaudience began to open up. I started having telepathic moments with people that I was associated with, just spontaneously. And it wasn't even just necessarily people I was close to, physically close to. I had a friend that I hadn't talked to in years reached out to me, and they happened to be in the same state, but at the time they were still a couple hundred miles away in Miami. And I just did an experiment where I asked them to focus and think about what I was going to think about, and I literally projected three two-word phrases to this person and asked them if they picked up on anything, or asked them to think of two three-word phrases, however it went. And just like that, after not having talked to this person for several years, they hit on three of the six words that I had sent. So I'm like, okay, something's really happening. And then I had a very special event that really started clearing the doubt away from me. And my oldest daughter and I, she's a fisher woman of like seriously, my I have a son and daughter that all of them love to fish, but these two particular ones, I think they would drag a paper clip backwards through a ditch if they thought they might catch a fish on it. It's like fishing is their life. It's therapy for them. So we went fishing this one day out on the beach. She was looking for a specific spot. I don't know if it was mangrove snapper that she was looking, whatever it was. Her fish guide thing online showed her that it was a spot to be found between these two houses somewhere out on Siesta Key, and off we went to try to find this fishing spot. Well, when she got there, we couldn't find it. A new construction had been put up in the place where it was supposed to be, so it was now a private property. We couldn't go there. We were just driving, trying to find an access to an area of the beach near there, and we passed this really plain, ugly looking mansion. I mean, a lot of the homes are very beautiful out there on the beach, $1 million homes, but this one looked like, I don't know, the Citadel. I don't know. It was crazy. And we laughed about it because at the time, I ain't even gonna say, because I actually, well, I will say, I laughed, but we were like, man, this ugly behind house, it probably belonged to President Trump or something. We just kind of laughed it off. And I'm not saying that to be ugly. I love Trump. I ain't even going there. That's a whole nother conversation. Spirit actually took me on a meditative experience where I had to respect his gangster. At first, I was kind of anti-Trump at first due to Democratic, programming and the media and all of that other stuff. But when I really went back and looked at the real history of the Don, they're full of it. Anywho, that's another. But I didn't know. We laughed it off. We went and found another spot on the beach. I had a beautiful meditation. We went home. All of that. Later that evening, or it might have even been the next day, I can't remember. I was laying in bed, chatting with my long distance boyfriend, and because we are distant, we do a lot of like telepathy, like hooking up into 5D, that kind of thing. But we have a daily practice where we, like at the end of the evening, we text all throughout the day. That's all lovely. But when he lays down to go to sleep, I lay down as well, and we focus and we try to link telepathically. So I was beginning to go into my whole meditation to do that, and then all of a sudden, instead of imagining myself with him, it was like all of a sudden I was back on that beach that I was in Sarasota, and I heard like it was coming across the water. No, that's not Trump's house. That's where they filmed the show Siesta Key. I sat up and I literally texted him, "Wait a minute, honey, I got to check on something. I'll get right back with you." And I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. So I Googled it, and sure enough, when I typed in house where they filmed the reality show Siesta Key, boop, hit Google and send, and that house popped up in Google, and I was blown away. I don't watch mainstream television. I haven't watched mainstream television since 1999. The only reason I even knew there was a reality show named Siesta Key was because one of the girls that I worked in the office with was talking about it, and she mentioned that one of her high school classmates was in the first season of the show. In fact, I had avoided going to Siesta Key for a couple of years because I figured once they started filming a reality TV show there, it was just going to be a huge traffic nightmare. We couldn't find a spot to go to the beach anyway. I didn't shop at any of the shops out there anyway, so I hadn't been to Siesta Key since I heard there was a reality show being filmed there. But here we are, and Spirit just gave me an answer. And I was like, whoa. So once I actually understood that I was hearing something, thoughts that I wasn't thinking, I willfully asked, then set the intention and asked if any of the angels, ancestors, or ascended masters were willing to work with me if they would come forward. And immediately I was led to the I Am Discourses of Saint Germain and a beautiful work called Christ Returns and Speaks His Truth, or they refer to it as the Christ Letters. And I can't even remember who did that one. But I listened to both of them, and yeah, I got it. I had heard and understood over time that they were saying like about a year and a half or two into a meditation practice, if you're on that path for initiation, it's like you will receive an invitation to initiation. So I kind of got it that I was reaching that point in time where it could happen, but I didn't understand that that was exactly what was happening. And shortly after I went through the I Am Discourses, then after that, there were a couple other books in that series by Guy Ballard. I can't remember his other name before he took the name Guy Ballard. I'll have to stop and look it up because it's kind of bothering me. I do want to mention a lot of these works, and we will go into them in detail on the channel a little bit later. But it just opened a whole new world to me. And then I listened to Dr. Edmund, I think Edmund Zekeli did an expose on Christianity, not an expose, but it was discussing like the roots of Christianity from the aspect of Moses and all of them as Essene mystics. And then there was Dr. Murdo McBain. Oh goodness, I can't think. Anyway, those stories kind of play out. They almost seem like fiction, like Jules Verne when he was talking about Journey to the Center of the Earth, that kind of stuff. There was a lot of those works back in the early 1920s, 1930s, but Dr. McBain was giving his account of his experiences with certain ascended masters. So was Guy Ballard. That wasn't fiction, but you have to have enough faith to actually believe it and understand it. So I went through those works, and then shortly after that, I was led to. Oh, actually, I was laying in bed one day, and I heard Saint Germain tell me that we were going to do something big together. Oh, and when I was asking about the Ascended Masters and all of that, I did have another really physical experience, visual experience, I should say. Like I said, Yeshua showed up, and we had several beautiful conversations coming out of meditation, sitting on the porch, all of that good stuff. I was led to information from Saint Germain. One day, I got a message from the I Am. I was led to the Om So Hum. And that, like I said, I may get into those stories a little bit more later. But Thoth showed up. I used to go outside every day, like I said, to meditate, and this ibis started coming up. One single ibis would walk down the sidewalk and stand right in front of me, like directly in front of my porch, every single day for about a week. No matter what time of day I went out to meditate, he would eventually just wander up, stand there, kind of look at me a little bit, and then walk away. He didn't fly away, walk away. He disappeared after he came for about a week. I didn't see him anymore for about 2 or 3 weeks until one day I was having one of those really difficult conversations with one of them toxic friends that I have since released. But I decided to handle the conversation differently, and instead of devolving into an argument, I released the call with love, and a blue jay showed up. I mean, dancing an absolute jig. Now, if you look up the spiritual meaning of blue jays, as I did, I was pretty stoked because it was talking about, of course, communication, but friendship and all the rest of that. But it was a profound sign for me. And as this blue jay was absolutely losing his mind, having this jig, dancing and squawking and all of this, jumping onto the grass and onto the sidewalk, back into the grass, the ibis walked right up to him within like 2 feet of him and stood there, and then walked away again. A couple days later, I'm on the porch having a conversation with a long distance friend of mine, basically one of my solstice gifts, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I am going to have to wrap this up shortly. But I get up to go put some clothes in the dryer, and I was having a thought, because at the time I was still kind of thinking about how am I going to get a YouTube channel going and this and that and all of this, and I was thinking I need to learn how to edit video. I didn't say it to anyone. I was thinking it as I was going to the dryer to put clothes from the washer into the dryer. When I came back and sat down, my friend, who was in Africa, 5,000 miles away, had texted, I know how to edit video. And I'm like, I didn't say that out loud. As I'm having that thought, I'm kind of blown away that he actually picked up on my thoughts. I look outside and I see a whole congregation of ibis, and that's what they're called. They're not a flock, they're a congregation. But there were over 100 ibises walking down the sidewalk, and they stopped. Now, we lived almost directly in the middle of a block. They came from the side that was over by the beach side. They didn't fly in. They flew from somewhere, but when they started coming towards me, when I looked out the window, they were about 3 or 4 houses down. They walked down to directly in front of the house and stopped and milled there. And right at that time, another friend of mine, toxic karmic, but again, I didn't know it at the time, called me, and I was like, yo, I think I have company. I'm going to have to call you back. And I went outside and actually let the door go harder than I meant to, and it slammed. I thought they would have flown away. They didn't fly away. I walked down the sidewalk, down the steps, and they let me come and stand to within 2 or 3 feet of them. Over 100 birds, and they're just milling around in the yard and everything, kind of spilling out into the street, so much so that a car coming by had to slow down to a crawl to keep from hitting them. They still didn't fly away. They stayed there for about 10-15 minutes, and then walked to the other side of the street, milled there for about 3 or 4 minutes, and walked back down the block to the in the direction they had come from, but on the opposite side of the street. And then when they got to the stop sign, then they flew away. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Now, those were not the only experiences of 2020, but that was early on in that year. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened. I had a heron show up in that same yard, another very spiritual bird. And then when I really started trying to put together like purpose and what I was supposed to do, I started hearing the revolution will not be televised and let my people go. And I didn't understand what that meant either, but I'm sitting on the porch one day and I had this thought, and I was super upset because I had come to realize that the religious organization that I had grown up in and walked away from and lost, like I said, basically shunned by my entire family over, is indeed a religious cult. But again, my thoughts on that I'll break down a little bit more later. I'm still not angry about any of that. I get it. I understand. But I heard Yeshua say, if I really were back here physically, there's not one Christian church that I would be affiliated with. Period. I'd sit down and braid another whip. That's what I'd do. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's so true. How did I think that? And he just laughed or whatever. It was like, don't, you weren't being disrespectful. It's the truth. And as I'm having that thought, 3 Nande parakeets came to visit me. Now, I live in South Florida and people do see them, but I had been living in Florida off and on between the move to Atlanta and coming back. I had been in Florida for 7 years. I was born and raised in Florida, but I had been in that part of Florida for 7 years and had never seen a Nande parakeet. They're not native to Florida. They came from over in Brazil somewhere, or somewhere in South America, but they are here now. But I had never seen one, and 3 of them came. They sat on the power line right in front of the house, and they talked and squawked and did whatever. Then they jumped down in the grass. They sat out with me for about 10 or 15 minutes, and from that day to this one, I've never seen another one. I had to look it up on on Google, to even see what they were at first. But they were literally like the 3 wise men coming to visit me after this profound conversation with Yeshua. And I was like, whoa. So, yeah, that was pretty awesome. Later on that year, I'll get into that later because things really started taking off. And like I said, I do have to get ready for work. So I appreciate you rocking on with me and listening this far, and we will finish this up either later on this afternoon or when I get off from work. I love you, fam, and until the next episode, as they say, peace and blessings. Namaste.